Welcome to the virtual laboratory tour for the Diagnostic Cytology program. We're here in the lobby of the Michener Institute today, and there's a couple things I want to go through with you about the program before we head over to Mount Sinai Hospital for the tour. One of the first important points I want to make mention of is that the Diagnostic Cytology program is a distance delivery format. What that means is that you're going to learn your theory at home through the internet or whatever location you choose. But you have to keep in mind that it is considered a full-time program and will require at least 35 to 40 hours of your time to get through the material. The second point I want to mention is that we have clinical affiliated or partners located all across the province of Ontario. The selection for clinical placements is partly done by you and us. So we give you an opportunity to select a site of your preference. You must be prepared to be placed at any one of our clinical partners across the province. Let's begin our tour in the preparatory area of the laboratory. This is where the sample arrives first and is processed for the ultimate interpretation. The first thing I want to do before anything else is to actually put on my gloves, because every sample is considered potentially infectious. When the sample arrives in the laboratory, it may or may not already have been entered into a hospital information system. Many laboratories also have, in addition to that, a laboratory information system. The specimens arrive with a requisition that has the patient's name and some specific identifiers on them. It also comes in a specimen container. And the sample is entered into the hospital laboratory information system to ensure that the patient's name is identified correctly, the sample and where the sample has come from is identified correctly as well. We're going to start where the patient sample is actually prepared. Nei Chong is going to help us with that. She's working inside a biohazard safety cabinet. The first thing she's going to do is to put on her gloves, again, because every patient sample is considered potentially infectious. We try to keep these work areas ultra clean, so there is no cross-contamination from one patient sample to another. Nei Chong is actually going to ensure that her specimen requisition and the specimen match. So the name has to match on both the bottle and the requisition. She then also has prepared a centrifuge tube in which the patient's name is located on that tube as well. She's cross-checking to make sure that everything is correct. Now what she's going to do is she's going to take that patient sample and pour it into a tube so that it can be centrifuged. We actually are not interested in a lot of the liquid. We're more interested in the cells that are contained within that liquid. Once she has completed this, it'll go into a centrifuge to be processed for about 10 minutes. Nei Chong is actually going to place the centrifuge tubes within the centrifuge. One tube has the patient sample, the other tube is a balancing tube, because centrifuges have to be balanced in order to function properly. She's ensuring that the lids are fastened on top of the centrifugation tube so that there is no spillage of specimen into the equipment. Now it's ready for the lid to be closed and the timer to be set. Nei Chong's going to finish preparation of the bronchial wash that was centrifuged earlier. Again, the gloves go on first. The sample has been centrifuged so that the cells will be located at the bottom of the tube. She's actually going to, again, place the specimen accession number onto the slides, ensuring that The slide number she records is the correct one from the correct patient. The excess fluid will be poured off or suctioned off of the patient sample so that only the cells at the bottom remain. Again, it's those cells that we're most interested in. A small amount of the sample is suctioned out of the bottom of the tube and will be placed on the slides. Our goal is to achieve a monolayer preparation so that there's not a lot of cells overlapping each other. The specimen therefore has to be manipulated a fair amount of times to ensure that we have a single layer of cell material. Once that's complete, it's placed in 95% ethyl alcohol for fixation. Another type of sample that is prepared within the cytology lab is done by thin prep processing. Here, Ne Chong is actually labeling a slide with the patient's, or actually the specimen sample number given to it by the laboratory information system. She's doing that in pencil first on the actual slide, and then taking a pre-generated label from the lab information system and placing it onto the slide. Next, it goes into the slide cassette for future processing. One of our more common samples in the cytology laboratory is pap smears. Here, Ne Chong is going to process the pap smears that have been received in the laboratory with the thin prep processor. The sample actually is received within a solution. She's again going to check that the patient name matches the slide that she will be placing the material on. She's going to open the thin prep processor and load the machine with the appropriate contents. Here, Ne Chong is loading the filter apparatus. So what will happen when the machine starts to process is that the specimen will be agitated and then will be suctioned in through a filter membrane, and the cells will rest on the membrane. It will then be transferred to a glass slide. So she's going to program the equipment. The specimen will be agitated so that we get a good mixture of cells. It will then be suctioned up and the cells will rest on a membrane filter. From there, the cells resting on the membrane filter will be transferred to a glass slide. A little puff of air causes the cells to be removed off the filter and pressed onto the slide. Once completed, it's fixed in 95% ethyl alcohol, so the cells will be preserved in as lifelike a state as possible. The next part of the process is staining the patient sample to ensure that the cells are actually visible. Here I'm working inside a fume hood that is vented directly to the outside of the building because we do actually work with hazardous chemicals. Here we have a staining dish. There's no slides in it at this point, but this is actually a depiction of a manual staining technique. And what would happen is that the slide rack would continue through this process and go through the various solutions. In the end, it would then be cover slipped within this same hood and again ventilated to the outside. Here's an example of some that have been stained and cover slipped. Processes within the cytology laboratory, like the staining and cover slipping, have been automated. So here we have an automated stainer. It's a Leica equipment. And the actual slide trays that I showed you earlier move from one bucket to another in an automated sequence. It goes through the appropriate solutions, and the finished product is completely stained slides. Once it's removed from the automated stainer, it's then brought over to the automated cover slipper. The slides are loaded in a carousel. They are brought up, mounting media is placed on top of the slide, and then a cover slip is automatically placed on that slide. We're now in the screening area of the laboratory at Mount Sinai Hospital. So we've completed the sample preparation, and we have all of our cells on the slide. It's been stained and cover slipped and ready for evaluation under the microscope. Again, when we pick up our slide for the evaluation, we make sure that the specimen, the patient name, matches the patient name on the slide, the requisition, and also the LIS system. This is where your interpretation and the report is going to be placed or input into the LIS system. So you need to make sure that that is matching. The screening process is quite methodical. You place your slide on the stage of the microscope, focus the sample, and screen it in a very methodical way, going from end to end on the slide, looking at all of the cells. If you find something that is significant, you have to change magnifications and get a closer look at it. Also, if it's significant, you need to dot it. So that when the specimen goes forward to the pathologist, all of the significant fields are marked for them. They don't rescreen the entire sample. They only look at the areas that you've identified as significant. So that's a very important role. Once you have completed the screening process and you've made your interpretation, you record your interpretation into the LIS system and move on to the next slide. So during the day, you're going to spend the better part of the day screening here and sitting at the microscope, interpreting samples. In the last part of the Diagnostic Cytology program, students spend some time at our clinical affiliates. These partner sites are located across the province and provide real-life experience for the student in a clinical laboratory setting. This is Sonia. She's here in the last part of the program, completing her clinical rotation. She's screening patient samples every day and ensuring that her accuracy is increasing so that by the time she finishes the program, she has met the required accuracy.